Hanging out. Mr. Credit here, as usual, weekdays at noon, right after Ray Lucia, say the station in your dial. That is, if you care about being smarter than everyone else. So Mike Litton, this is, and I read your blog post here, and I thought it was pretty compelling, and I wanted to give you a chance to kind of take it out and duke it out on the air here. I mean, a lot of people have been saying that the San Diego real estate market has bottomed or is in a bottoming process. We've also had people come on the air who've been very frank, and they think that prices are going to go lower from here. Do you think that the market is turning a corner, and if so, why?
Well, to be perfectly honest, in 6 months we'll know whether we hit bottom or not. That's the honest answer. Do I feel like we've hit bottom, and do I feel like we're on our way back up? Yes, and I'll tell you why. There are a number of economic indicators that we're looking at that tell us that the market is starting to heat back up again. And not the least of which is inventory is extremely low. In fact, in some areas below $600,000 sales price. In some areas all around San Diego County, there are a lot of economists that are indicating we have less than 2 months supply. Economists are also telling us, local economists are also telling us we have a rental crisis in San Diego County. We have less than 1% vacancy rate right now. And statistical full occupancy is actually quite higher than that. And so when you start looking at that, the fact that last year we imported 30,000 more people into San Diego County than we exported, and we built 5,500 new homes. Start looking at those numbers. Start thinking about how those things affect what's going on currently. Now, what we're starting to see is the phone ringing more. We're closing more escrows. We're selling more homes. Now, bear in mind that there is something in particular that everybody needs to know, especially sellers. Buyers right now are incredibly value conscious. They have been for a number of years because they've had a buyer's market for a number of years. And I'm not suggesting that we're in a seller's market now, because I don't believe we're there yet. I believe we're shifting, and I believe we're shifting out of a buyer's market into potentially a neutral type market and towards a seller's market eventually in the future. And I believe the fundamentals are there that if given enough time that we could get there. Look at what's happening with interest rates. Look at what's happening with affordability. Look at what's happening with all of that. Take all of that and put it together. Leading economic indicators, everything. When you put all of it together, what you see is the fundamentals are there. The foundation's been built for a market turnaround. Has it actually happened? We'll find out one of these days. We'll know when we look back and we see the numbers. But inventory is extremely low. And there are a lot of areas of San Diego County where you've got to buy, and you've got to buy quick. But if you're a seller, one of the things you need to know are two things. Number one, the properties that are priced aggressively are selling, and they're the nicest properties on the market. So the nicest properties on the market and that are priced aggressively are the ones that are selling. The ones that are overpriced and are not the nicest ones on the market, they're just sitting there. So is it a market that's completely turned a corner? Absolutely not. Is it something where buyers still have a lot of power? Absolutely they do. But they don't have as much to pick from. That's the point.
So what does that mean? Because typically what we need for a real estate market to not just be stable but to be appreciating is we need a guy to be able to come into a neighborhood and pay more for the same house than the guy who bought a year ago.
Exactly.
And that's not there yet.
No, it's not. And I'll give you one example of something that just happened. I just closed an escrow on a property that was purchased as a bank-owned property and was fixed up and turned around, put back on the market, flipped, if you will. And we sold it for $375. Literally sold it for $375. We couldn't get an appraisal but for $360. And originally the appraisal came in at $350. If we hadn't fought like there was no tomorrow, we'd have closed that at $350. So there is a challenge right now in terms of an appreciating market when you can't get appraisals for VA and FHA mortgages, when you can't get appraisers to work with you in terms of what's currently happening in the market, because some of them just don't get it. And, appraisal is an opinion of value. JJ will tell you that. It's an opinion of value. I didn't agree with this particular appraiser's opinion. I pointed out why. I believe I was right. I believe he was wrong. I believe it should have closed at $375. And by the way, that would have been an example of price appreciation.
Right. So what is the control on that, JJ? Because we've talked about a lot of times, how you guys have not only just underwriting control, but some appraisal control as well. Could you help on something like that?
Well, yeah, definitely. I mean, there's always a reconsideration of value that you can implement at any time. I don't care if it's on a refinance or if it's on a purchase. I mean, when we run into these situations, you can't just put your hands up and say, oh, okay, the price value is this.
Right.
I mean, especially on the houses that have been fixed up and have been turned over, I mean, appraisals are subjective because what is the value of the work and the material that's gone into the property to fix it up? I mean, how much is that worth? And that's where the subjectiveness comes into the appraisers, and when they're making these adjustments on value, and that's how the values need to come up. Somebody has to point out sometimes the work, the cost of the work, compared to the comparables that they're using. This is an upgraded house now.
Yeah.
And that's a lot of times where, you know, these investors are going into areas, and the homes that they're selling and putting back on the market are in a better condition. They're going to, you know, last longer because there's new material going into those homes, and that's the value that needs to be adjusted for. So you can make these fights. And you know, on the appraisals, I mean, when we talk about like turning the market, 3 appraisals, and one thing that I look at, you know, in a downward market, you have, you know, appraisers have to pull the statistical analysis of that particular zip code and area,
Right.
and say, okay, value is declining. Well, we were, you know, in a declining market for many, many years here.
Exactly.
And then it became stable, and for the first time, 3 appraisals in the just last week have come in with increasing values.
Right.
Now that's exciting to me, only because we're never going to know when we're past the bottom until
Yeah.
we're far past it.
Exactly.
But when I start to see the statistical data coming through on appraisals that show that areas are increasing, 3 different zip codes here, that's kind of a sign for me that, you know what, maybe we are past this thing.